Hi, everyone. I'm Paul at the Garland County Library, and today's program is called 5 Keys to Writing Short Stories for Preteen Girls. And our presenter today is one of my favorite people to work with. She's a strong supporter and advocate of libraries and literacy in general, and her name is Dr. Millie Gore, aka Professor Gore, and she is an award-winning writer who has her books that have been shelved in over 1,000 libraries on every continent, except, as she is sure to point out, Antarctica. She has presented workshops on writing for over 2 decades throughout the U.S. and in Great Britain, and she holds a doctorate degree from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville and taught writing to students from first grade through graduate school for 36 years. Participants today will have an opportunity to come to the library and get a pre-publication copy of her new book, Short Stories for Arkansas Girls, and her award-winning children's picture book, All Is Assuredly Well. We'll have a limited number of copies of those available at the library, so please come to the front desk and you can ask for those. And if you're watching live and have any questions for Dr. Gore during her program today, be sure to leave those in the comment section and I'll make sure they get asked for you. So without any further ado, I'm happy to introduce our guest presenter, who is Dr. Millie Gore. So welcome.
Hello, Paul. Thank you. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm going to take off my mask. You've got to see my wonderful book nerd mask, and I will take it off. I can assure you that Paul and I are in a large room. He's about 15 feet from me, and so we are both safe without our masks on. Think of me as Millie. I taught for 36 years, and I taught elementary school in New Mexico, first grade, second grade, elementary special ed. I taught 7th grade English and 7th grade students with emotional and behavior disorders. I taught high school students with emotional and behavior disorders, intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities. If they were true non-readers, would never be able to read. And I taught at the university for 20 years at Midwestern State in Wichita Falls, Texas. So my high school time was in Missouri. My elementary and junior high time were in New Mexico, where I was born and raised. And my university time was in Texas. I moved here 8 years ago when I retired. So I fell in love with this library and am excited to be able to share with you today. Hello, especially to the old timers who have been in my workshops before. I'm happy to have you back, and greetings and welcome to the folks that I haven't gotten to meet in person. So let's get started then. Five keys to writing short stories for preteen girls. Now, here's an overview. You will notice that we're going to do key 2 before we do key 1, because key 1 is more a general thing that I teach in my beginning writing workshops, but it's something that we have to go back and think about in the context of girls. So we're starting with key 2. A girl must be the hero of her own story. Then key 1, the writer must understand the purpose of story. Key 3, the hero has a goal and a barrier. Key 4, the story must have a defining beginning, middle, and end. And you'd be surprised how many don't, that people write. Number 5, keep the story fast-paced and engaging with dialogue. And we're going to be doing some practice today, so I hope you either have a laptop that you can work on or a writing implement and some paper. And if you don't have either, if you can't write on your laptop because you're listening to me and you don't have paper and pencil, then work in your head. So, caveat, my personal pet peeves. I use the word hero. I don't like the word heroine. I consider hero to be a gender neutral term. I have a lawyer. My lawyer happens to be a woman. I do not call her my lawyeress. I have a doctorate degree from the University of Arkansas. Don't call me a doctoress. My physician is a woman. I don't call her a doctoress. My accountant happens to be a man, but if my accountant were a woman, I would not call him an accountantess. I am a teacher, and historically, teachers were only men. So following that line of thought, don't think of me as a teacheress. I was a professor. Those were only men for 1,000 years. And don't think of me as a professoress. In the same way, I don't use the term male nurse. I just use the term nurse, regardless of the sex of the person caring for me. Don't use the word male teacher or male cosmetologist. My cosmetologist happens to be a man, and he's fabulous. So those are my caveats. If you happen to ask me a question, don't say, well, this heroine, because I'm going to use the word hero. My own personal problem with that. All right, so key number 2, which we're starting with. Remember, we're not starting with key number 1. You didn't miss something. We're starting with key number 2. And that is, a girl must be the hero of her own story. I grew up with beautiful illustrated picture books. My book with Maestro Wilson is the kind of look of book that I grew up with. These were gorgeous things, but they were stories in which a girl was empty-headed and she had to be looked after, and a man had to save her. So, for example, there was Cinderella, who was mistreated by her after her father died, who took care of her. She was mistreated by the wicked stepmother and the wicked stepsisters. And they called her Cinderella because she had to clean out the fireplace and was covered with cinders and soot. And she was helpless at changing her state in life. It took the fairy godmother. I'm glad it wasn't the fairy godfather, because then it would be a male again rescuing her. But it took the fairy godmother to set up a situation where a handsome prince could rescue her. I had Snow White, in which the foolish, beautiful Snow White ate the poisoned apple, and so she fell into a coma, and 7 little men had to take care of her for who knows how long as she was in a coma, until a handsome prince came along and kissed her and took away the spell. I had Little Red Riding Hood, in which a little girl disobeys her mother and talks to a wolf, and the wolf ends up eating her and her grandmother, and she has to be saved by the hunter who comes and kills the wolf. The fairy tales I grew up reading showed girls as helpless. They were not agents. They were not capable of doing things. And I began to think of them as the Lucy girls I watched I Love Lucy, and I didn't like it. I Love Lucy, if you're too young to remember that. Lucy was always getting herself into trouble. She was beautiful, of course. She was getting herself into trouble. She was stupid, and her husband, the handsome Ricky Ricardo, had to step in and save her from her own idiocy. So I began thinking of books and stories as the Lucy girls. I wanted to read stories of girls like me, girls who were not beautiful, girls who were not stupid, and girls who didn't have to be saved by anyone, man or woman, girls who could figure out how to solve their own problems, girls who had goals, and girls who wanted to solve those. I had a lovely dad at the workshop I did for the Fayetteville Library right before COVID. Precious man. And we had set the number of participants at 20, and about 25 people wanted to come to my workshop. And so he did not make the first 20. He didn't sign up in time. So he turned up about 2 hours early to wait for my workshop to start, in hopes that someone wouldn't show up. And in that period of time, I visited with him, and he said, I have wonderful stories that I tell my kids. I want to make them into books. My kids love them, and they'll be great books. And I said to this dear man, well, tell me about your stories. And he said, oh, my kids and I, we go all these places. We go to the Arctic. We go to the rainforest. We go to the Himalayas. We go to New York City. and they always get in trouble or lost or something happens, and I have to swoop in and save them. And they love my stories. I said, you dear man, I'm sure your children love your stories, and your stories make them feel safe. But these are stories for you to tell your family and to write down for your family if you want to. These are not stories that are considered contemporary children's stories, because in contemporary children's stories, the children solve their own problems. A parent does not swoop down and solve it for them. It's like in the old Greek tragedies and myths, Deus ex machina, where the god is lowered down on a rope onto the stage, and this god comes out of nowhere and saves the day. So in modern stories for tweens, girls, it's a girl who must be the hero of her own story. Now, I'm going to chant it to you, and I can't hear you, but I want you to chant it to me. A girl must be the hero of her own story. You. Me. A girl must be the hero of her own story. You. Last time. A girl must be the hero of her own story. You. All right. So here we go. Now, in a story for young girls, the protagonist must be a girl. It must be only one protagonist. It must be the real protagonist. Sometimes it's not. We get them mixed up. And she is the hero of her story. So let's talk about each one of those. There is only one protagonist. Lisa Crone is an author and an editor, and she's worked at places like major publishing houses in New York, and she gives workshops. And one day, one of the students in her workshops, an older woman, it's an ongoing workshop, and so she had come in a month after the workshop started, and she had her story to share. And Lisa said, this woman had all of these wonderful kids doing all of these wonderful, amazing, exciting things, and I couldn't figure out who's the protagonist in this story. So, according to Lisa, I asked this wonderful woman, who's the main character? And the woman said, well, does there have to be a main character? Can't they all be main characters? And Lisa said, no, in contemporary children's literature, there is one main character. Now, she's not alone in the universe. Her friends and other allies serve at her will to help her achieve whatever goal she wants. Think Harry Potter, and I wish this could be a girl, but Harry Potter is something that I know we all are familiar with to one extent or another. Ron and Hermione and other people helped Harry, but Harry was the main protagonist. He was the main character. And of course, sometimes Hermione got in his way and did things on her own. But in general, over this 500,000 words that J.K. Rowling wrote, in general, Harry Potter was the guy who was in charge, and his friends and allies helped when he asked them to do specific things for him. The next one of our three, make sure you have the real protagonist, the right protagonist. Sometimes when I start writing a story, I think the protagonist is one girl. I have two girls in it, for example, and it turns out it's actually the other girl that's the protagonist. I want to tell you a story about Freddie and me. Freddie was in my 7th grade Spanish class, and I picked her out to be my new best friend. We were both new at the school, and I didn't have any friends in that class, and Freddie didn't have any friends in that class. And so I went over to ask her to be my partner when we were supposed to get a conversational partner. And we became fast friends. Well, when I got my driver's license, we promised each other that neither one of us would ever go out of the house if we'd been drinking. We had heard of other kids who had been drinking and had car wrecks. And we made a pledge to each other in ninth grade when I got my driver's license that we wouldn't do that. Well, one night I'm at home and my mom and dad, my dad was an attorney and my folks gave lots of cocktail parties. And they were having a cocktail party and they gave me a glass of red wine. So I was enjoying the cocktail party as much as a ninth grade girl can with a bunch of old people. And there was a knock on the door and I went to it, assuming it was more of my parents' guests showing up. And it was Freddie, my boyfriend Bill, and her boyfriend Danny. And I had my glass of wine in my hand and Freddie said, we thought we'd go out and drive around. And I said, sure, let me go tell my folks. So I finished my wine, left my glass, told my folks, and got in the car with Freddie and her boyfriend in the front seat. He was driving, and my boyfriend Bill and me in the back seat. And Freddie tells Danny, I want you to go out North Prince and I want you to go 3 miles beyond Section Line Road. So he starts driving that way, and I see that the evening is going to be spent kissing and cuddling in the back seat with my best friend and her boyfriend in the front seat, kissing and cuddling. He gets 3 miles out past Section Line Road, and she says, turn left. So he turns left. She said, I want you to go 2 miles, because we were out in the middle of New Mexico, Clovis, New Mexico, and everybody knew that area like the back of their hand. And so after 2 miles, she said, turn right, and then go about the length of a football field. So he did that. She said, stop. And then she said, you guys stay here. I want to talk to Millie alone. I'm thinking, oh, there's some important gossip to hear, or something's going on. So she tells me it's a full moonlit night. We could see almost as well as day. And she says, follow me. So we go walking along a bar ditch. And this particular bar ditch was filled with moving water. Someone had let their water escape their cornfield, and the bar ditch, it was running down the bar ditch. So we got about 20 yards from where the boys were, and she said, stop, and I stopped. Now, you have to understand, I was the leader of our clique. There were about 12 of us in our clique, 3 girls and 9 boys, and our clique were all band kids. And we were the kid. We didn't smoke. We didn't drink. Didn't do marijuana. We were straight as an arrow. And Freddie was a follower, and I was the leader. And so we got to this spot by the bar ditch, and she put her hands on my shoulders, and she turned me around so that my back was to the bar ditch. And I said, "What's up? What's going on?" And she put her hands right here on me, and she shoved me backwards into the bar ditch, and I landed in all this muddy water. And I started cussing and climbing out of the bar ditch. And I said, "What do you think you're doing?" And she said, "You and I made a promise to each other months ago that we would never leave the house if we'd been drinking. You were drinking. You left the house. You violated our oath to each other. And so we're going to take you back. I'm going to tell Danny and Bill that we're taking you back to your house. We're going to leave you there, and you don't get to go out with us tonight. Now, whether Bill wants to go ahead and stay with me and Danny, or Bill wants us to take him home, we'll do that. But you're going home." And so luckily Danny's car had plastic seats that could easily be cleaned, and they drove me home. The boys had no idea what had happened. They were just stunned that I was covered in mud, and I didn't say what had happened, and Freddie didn't say what had happened. They just said, she just said, "We're taking Millie home, and Bill, if you want us to take you home, we will, but you don't have to go home, but Millie has to go home." So I sneaked in with all this cocktail party going on to the bathroom and showered and cleaned up and so forth. I loved that story, and I told it for years. And then when I started writing stories for preteen girls, I realized I was not the protagonist of that story. Freddie was the protagonist of that story. I was not one with the agency. I didn't make anything happen. I had something happen to me. Freddie was the protagonist. She had a goal, which was to see that Millie lived up to what their promise to each other was, And when Millie didn't do that, Freddie had the agency to punish me for it, to give me incentive not to make that mistake again. So Freddie was the real protagonist of that story. If I were going to write that story, I might tell the story, but I would make it clear that Freddie was the hero of the story. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I am not advocating violence or shoving people in bar ditches if they do something that displeases you. But that was Freddie's story. She had something she believed in, and she had the agency to make that happen. So again, the other girl can tell the protagonist story, but the protagonist must be the hero. The protagonist telling her own story in first person is the easiest way to write. And it's usually the most engaging to hear the protagonist say, I did this, and I did that, and I did this other thing. Okay. So the girl is unquestionably the hero of the story. This is her story. She has agency. That means she can make things happen, and she does. Friends and allies can help, but at her direction. Adults, even parents, can help, but at her direction. One of the stories that I wrote that won an award was about a mouse. It was set in an opera hall, and she, out in the woods, she would sing, and her aunts and uncles and her million mouse cousins would listen to her sing, and they loved it. But she wanted to sing in an opera hall, and they worked their way and got into the opera hall, and she got stage fright and couldn't sing. And she ran off the stage, and her dad followed her and comforted her. And the next day she said to him, I want to sing in that opera hall. And this was set in Van Buren, Arkansas, the Van Buren Opera Mouse, I called the story. And so she said to her dad, I need the help of our family to be able to do that. I can sing in the forest where we're sitting on the soft moss and among the acorns and the twigs, but I can't sing sitting on that hard stage. I can sing in the moonlight in the forest, but I can't sing with those lights of the opera house that you turned on. I need the stage to be more like the forest. I need you and our family to help me fix the stage up and fix so I can sing in the moonlight in the opera house. And so she directed the various members of the family to bring in moss and stones and mushrooms and whatever, and to gnaw a hole in the ceiling of the opera house so that when that was going to be a full moon night, so that when the moon came right overhead and came through, it would shine on her and she would begin to sing. And so I ended that story with a mouse began to sing. So friends and allies can help, adults and even parents can help, but only at her direction. She tells them what to do. They don't take over like this dear man in Fayetteville who swoops in and rescues his children. Adults and even parents can help, but only at the girls' direction. All right, our hero. The best heroes are likable, but they're also imperfect. Now, we've probably all seen House, and he's the anti-hero. What an obnoxious doctor. He is not likable. But when we are writing stories for tween girls, our hero must be likable. Tween girls will not like an anti-hero. They want a hero that they can live the story through. And we want to be likable, but if we're honest, we know that we're imperfect. So we've got to create likability. What are some of the things that psychologists of reading tell us that tween girls want to see in a hero to make them likable? She can show loyalty. She can show courage. She can show kindness. She's really good at something. She's funny, often, not always, but often she's funny. And I don't mean you're writing a comedy story. I just mean something about the girl is funny. Maybe she says a funny thing now and then, and she's unique. She's not like every other kid in the 6th grade. There's something about her that's different. But she's imperfect. She has a mild flaw that can be seen as endearing. It's not a serious flaw. She doesn't hurt animals. She doesn't hurt little kids. She doesn't steal stuff. It's a mild flaw that we can come to see as endearing. Maybe she stuffs her dirty clothes under the bed, or she when she's supposed to wash the dishes, she hides them in the oven instead. In the best stories, the hero learns and changes internally. She not only succeeds at her external challenge, but she learns and she grows from the experience. Now, in a short story, I try to hint at an internal change, but it's very difficult to do in a short story. In a novel or a novelette, a chapter book for girls of this age, then you should show how the hero learns and changes internally, but it's difficult to do in a short story because we have such a limited amount of words. When you're writing a short story for tweens, can be 750 to 2,000 words, and it's very difficult to set up the story and tell it and show the hero changing internally. So the best short stories, that happens, but right now we're just going for a good short story. So now we're to key 1. We've just done key 2, and now we're back to key 1, which is understand the purpose of story. And the purpose of story is to entertain and not teach morals. There is a difference between a moral of the story and teaching morals. The moral of the story is what the reader infers about what the writer thinks is the way that a life should be lived. The reader draws her own conclusion. Now, again, we're going to entertain, not teach morals. While entertaining, we want to allow the reader to experience something through the protagonist's eyes. And she could walk away thinking, this is a problem that could happen to a person. And this is a good way a person could solve it. When I was Googling short stories and morals of stories and teaching morals and the difference, I came up to a clip that all I read of it was, mother shook her hands at her finger. Mother shook her finger at the girl and said, I told you not to put all your eggs in one basket. Bam! I knew that was a story that was teaching morals. It was not a story that was going to appeal to a tween. Now, do I think morals should be taught? Absolutely. But it's not the job of the writer of tween stories to teach morals. Leave that to mom and dad. Leave that to a person's religious institution. It's not our job as writers to teach morals. Now, an exception is, I don't even know if, because of the internet, if there are a lot of Sunday school presses out there. But used to be, back when I first started writing and selling work 20, 30 years ago, the easiest way to break into the writing world was to sell stories to children's Sunday school magazines. And I sold stories to children's Sunday school magazines. I don't even know if those even exist because of the internet now. But if you want to teach morals, I encourage you to be a Sunday school teacher. I've been a Sunday school teacher and I taught morals. But that's not the purpose of story. When we are writers and telling story, our purpose is not to teach morals, it's to entertain. There is a moral behind the story. In our story, we will show what we believe is the way a person should live a life. And it gives the child a chance to experience the world through some other person's eyes. And then to be able to say, this is a problem that can happen to a person, and this would be a good way to solve it. That is not teaching morals. Children need to be taught morals. It's a job of their parents, their religious institutions. It is not our job as writers unless we're writing for a publication that they're paying us to explicitly teach morals. All right, key number 3. The hero has a goal and a barrier. Our hero wants something. Our girl wants something. She encounters a but. That's with 1 T. And the but is a barrier to achieving her goal, and that's conflict. Story is conflict. The majority, I do the master class thing. I buy it. It's like $200 a year, the master class online. And I've gotten to do workshops with lots of famous writers online. And one thing they would all agree about is story is conflict. If there is no conflict, there is no story. Historically, writers have said the source of the conflict is going to be the self, other people, nature. And over the years, I have come to add life circumstances to the cause of the conflict. For example, poverty. Well, poverty really, for me, isn't self, other people, or nature. Poverty is more a life circumstance. And that's often the big barrier in the stories that I write. I like to write about girls who don't have the advantages that I had financially growing up, girls that I've taught. I spent my life teaching in special ed, teaching in Title I schools. And so I saw how poverty affected the lives of boys and girls. And so I tend to write a lot about kids who have a goal and they have to fight the poverty that they were born into and to be able to meet their goal. Before we move on, Paul, we have any questions? Okay. All right, so let's talk about what are some goals that tween girls have. You can look in psychology books, psychology articles on Google, and ask what are goals that tween girls have. And we know that general goals, receiving attention, winning recognition, and admiration. We know that tween girls want to win competitions, whether it's a spelling bee, whether it's a race on the playground or in an organized relay race. We know that girls want to learn new skills that they value. They're not interested in learning skills that somebody else values. They want to learn skills that they value. They want to be recognized as a leader, or many of them do. They all want to develop friendships, including with animals. They want to become part of a desirable group, and that's a group that's desirable to them. Doesn't have to be desirable to anybody else and might not be desirable to adults, but they want to become part of a group, of a desirable group. And girls just want to have fun. So those are some of the goals that we know that tween girls have from psychology. I picked this girl out. I bought a subscription to Shutterstock, which is a great deal. That's $29 a year, and I get to download 10 pictures a month and have the right to use them. And she just looked so warm and so friendly and so imperfect to me. And that thing she's carrying, I thought it was some kind of weird ball. And when I blew it up, it's a motorcycle helmet. So maybe, I don't know if she's using it for ride a bicycle or what, but this is a girl who looks warm and friendly and like she wants all of those things. She wants attention and recognition and admiration. She wants to win at things and learn valued skills. She wants to be a leader. She wants to develop friendships and become part of a group. And this is definitely a little girl who wants to have fun adventures. I liked the fact that her hair looks like my hair looks so much of the time, and her clothes are half tattered, although probably a top dollar for those kinds of clothes nowadays. But she looked imperfect to me and like the kind of tween girl that I would have as the hero of one of my stories. So I'm going to start you in a minute, and you're going to have 2 minutes. Hopefully you either have a paper and something to write with, or you have a laptop or something else that you can write on while you have this up. And I want you to write one specific goal that 3 different tween girls might have. Now you're going to go back here to the general goals, but I don't want general goals here. So for example, instead of saying she wants recognition, don't say that, but say Beth wants to sell the most light bulbs for her school choir. I got that one because my first cousin's granddaughter just wanted to sell the most cheese and sausage packets for her school's flag corps. She sold $605 worth, and she was number 1. The number 2 person sold $100 worth. So very specific. Don't say she wants recognition, but say Beth wants to sell the most light bulbs for her school's choir. Or Mary wants to act in the school play. That would get her recognition. Emily wants to win outstanding student in 7th grade geography. That would get her recognition. Going back to the generals, that would also be learning new valued skills, being recognized as a leader, winning at competitions. So those are from the general, we take the general goals that we know tween girls have, because those are the stories they're going to want to read about, girls who are trying to meet the same kinds of goals that they want. And so you're going to have 120 seconds to come up with one specific goal for each of 3 different tween girls. Now I have every 30 seconds, I have a different slide that's going to come up. It says the exact same thing as this one. It's just a picture of a different girl. So don't think you've missed something and there's something new on that slide. It's not. It's 120 seconds. The slides are just to show you where you are in the 2 minutes. I have my timer here, and after 30 seconds, I'll change it to the 90 seconds, and then to the 60, and then to the 30, and then we'll stop. And then I'm going to ask you to type in however that's done, because I don't know. Paul's my tech guy across there. Pick the one you like best of the 3 that you've written down, the very specific goal that a tween girl might have. So it can be meeting any of these or multiple ones. Let me give you an example, though, before you start. I wanted to be in band from 7th grade. From 2nd grade. My brother was 3 years older than I. He was in band in 5th grade. And so I told my dad, when I get to 5th grade, I want to be in band. I want to start taking music lessons on a band instrument in 4th grade. So when I get in 5th grade, I'll already know how to play it. And my dad said, no, band is for boys. It's not for girls, and you can't be in band. And so I begged and begged and begged. So my general goal was I wanted admiration and recognition that I could be in band. I had seen the school bands march in the parade, and I wanted to wear a band uniform and play and march in a parade, and people to see me and admire me. I didn't know anything about winning competitions, so that didn't come into it. I wanted to learn what was for me a new valued skill, which was how to play a band instrument. I kind of had the trumpet in mind. I wanted to be recognized as a leader. I wanted to develop friendships with band kids. I wanted to become part of a desirable group, which to me the band was. And I wanted to have fun. I just thought being in band would be so much fun. So that was a specific goal that I had. It was Millie wanted to join band in 5th grade, or Millie wanted to take music lessons in 4th grade on a band instrument so she could get into band in 5th grade. So if you will begin now, I will change the slide in 30 seconds. Go. All right. If you would please type in if you didn't get even one goal, then you didn't, but I mean, specific goal, but if you did 3, pick it out the one you like best, please, and type it into Paul, and he will share the first dozen that come in with us. Nice, Caitlin. Good. Well, as a tween, if it's a little more immediate, maybe she wanted to be president of the 7th grade class. Okay, so let's go back to the first one. Read us the first one again. She wanted to be on the yearbook committee. Who was our little girl? What was Caroline? So by being on the yearbook committee, Caroline would receive attention. She would receive recognition. She would receive admiration. She would learn new valued skills. I was on the yearbook committee in high school, incidentally, so I'm very familiar with that. She might be recognized as a leader for being on the yearbook committee. She would develop friendships with the rest of the yearbook folks, because believe me, you work together really closely when you're on the yearbook committee. Probably the yearbook group was considered a desirable group in her school. And it really is a lot of fun having adventures. I was the faculty chairman, so I was the editor of the faculty section of our high school yearbook, and so I got to use this big fancy camera, and I would go around on my yearbook hour and take snapshots of faculty members doing things, and they were not posed as elegant faculty members. They were tying their shoes or emptying the trash can or sneaking off down to grab a cup of coffee. So, and then the second one was Kamala will become president. Well, she certainly would receive attention, recognition, and admiration. To become the president, you have to win a competition. You don't necessarily have to do that to be on the yearbook staff, but you definitely have to be the president of, I assume, the 7th grade class. She would learn new valued skills. You don't get a bigger leader than being president. She developed friendships with with people involved in her election and with the other people who were the leaders of the 7th grade. However, one must always understand that when one is president, one also gets enemies. So that would be a part of that in that continuing story, being part of a desirable group. And well, I don't know if being the president of the United States or being the president of the 7th grade would be having fun adventures, but I think there are probably people who would say it would. So those are wonderful. Anybody else shared with us? Okay. So take a breather for just a minute, and I'm going to tell you about what we're going to be doing next. Now, conflict is story, and story is conflict. If Kamala wanted to be president and she went out and said to a group of kids, hey, I want to be president. Will you vote for me? And would you be my campaign manager? And everybody said yes. And nobody wanted to run against her. And she was declared president of the 7th grade or the United States by acclamation. That ain't a story, girls. If Carol wanted to be on the yearbook committee, and just because she wanted to be on the yearbook committee, she went and told the chairman of the yearbook committee and her family and whoever else, and maybe she has a C average, but that's not a problem. And so her family says, sure, take the time that it takes to be on the yearbook committee, and she's on the yearbook committee. That's not a story. there have to be external barriers to those external goals. Again, in the best ones, there are internal barriers and things that we learn internally, but that's kind of beyond the scope of a short story for tween girls. So there have to be external barriers to those external goals, and we call those buts. Now, the buts can be culture, money, poverty, adults. Those are often big buts in tween stories. Rules, other kids, prejudice, and physical or mental disabilities. And I was a special ed teacher and professor for lots of years, as well as a multicultural education teacher and professor. In culture, we can also, it's not necessarily ethnic culture, it can also be family culture. In my family culture, my dad believed that girls were not supposed to be in band, that the band was just for boys. And I wanted to be in band, and he said, no, band is for boys. And as I continued to beg, my dad was a pianist, and in band he had played in the percussion section, the mallet instruments like chimes and marimbas and so forth. And he said, no, piano is a much more suitable aspiration for a girl. Girls can't be in band. Band is for boys. So it was my home culture that created the but for me. And an adult, my dad, it wasn't money. We had the money to pay for private lessons and buy an instrument. And there's no rule, but my dad, in his mind, there was a rule that band was for boys. There were no other kids involved. It wasn't a matter of prejudice or physical mental disability that I had to overcome. The but to my goal in being in band in 5th grade, starting privately on a band instrument, and I didn't even know what they all were, but starting privately on maybe a trumpet, was thwarted by the culture of my family. I've worked with lots of girls over the years, and I've worked with lots of young women who were college students who would tell me in multicultural education that in their culture, girls were supposed to stay home and have families, and they weren't supposed to be going to college, and that they had to fight their fathers, their mothers, their grandparents, their churches, and everybody in order to come to college. But they were in college. They wanted to be a teacher, or they wouldn't have been in my class. They had to fight all of those cultural influences. I have a close friend whose father belongs to a group of a church group of 8 gentlemen who want their daughters to stop going to school after they get through junior high school and stay home and learn to cook and clean and raise children. And they're preparing them to be part of the culture of their religious community. And certainly we've probably all seen some of the programs on television now about young people who want to go out into the world, and they are part of a religious culture that wants them to maintain the lifestyle. So culture certainly can be a big one, but it's not just necessarily a religious culture, an ethnic culture. It can be a family culture. Like my father's family culture was that band is for boys and girls can't be in band. So now I want you to pair some external goals with some external barriers. A girl wants to take ice skating, but mom says the family can't afford it. If you live in Hot Springs, the but would probably be there is no skating rink. But in this story, the girl wants to take skating, but mom says the family can't afford it. The girl wants to be a drum major, but only boys are allowed to be drum majors. The girl wants to swim to the islanded camp, but rules forbid under 15s to take the swim challenge. This girl is a terrific swimmer. She would be able to swim to the island. She knows she can swim to the island, but the camp rules, she's under 15, she's 12, and the camp rules forbid under 15s to take the swim challenge. So I'm going to give you 120 seconds. Pair one but with each goal for 3 girls. So for example, Mary wants to win the science fair, but she needs $50 for materials and her mother can't afford it. Beth wants to act in the school play, but rehearsals are after school and she has to babysit. Emily wants to win outstanding student in 7th grade geography, but her family doesn't have maps, globes, or geography books. So I want you to have 3 different goals than specific goals than you had on the previous challenge. 3 different goals this time, and each one of them paired with a but, a conflict, a wall that gets in the way, the conflict, the challenge that the girl has to overcome to be able to meet her goal. And again, in the following slides, they say exactly what this one says. So don't, because there's a different picture, let it think that you're missing some new text. You can just look up again if you need to be reminded of what the text is. So here we go. We're going to start. Okay, by the way, I think this girl looks like me. If you will please text into Paul. Yes, Paul. I love it. Ramona wants to get a pet cat, but her mother is allergic. So that's an external circumstance. You can say it's other people, but I don't think it's necessarily her mother that's the problem. It's her mother's allergies that are the problem. And who gave us that one? Was that Caitlin? Good. Someone else? Excellent, Caitlin. I love it. That's a big problem to overcome. Okay. Caitlin, was that something you experienced yourself? Did you want a pet cat, but you couldn't get one because of your mom having allergies? Okay, good. We have anyone else out there who's willing to share with us one of their butts, their goals with a butt? Okay. And how about you sharing another one with us while we're waiting to see if someone else will share? And who said that? Anna says that Stacy wants to be a marine biologist, but is not good at swimming. Excellent. So we have conflict. Caitlin, as a little girl, says that her little girl Caitlin wants to be a better writer, but is not good at brainstorming. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful, and it does. I'm putting you on the spot right now to think something up. I'll bet by bedtime you have 15 different specific goals with butts. So that's at least you're getting the information and you can put it to use as your mind works it through. I'm an INFP, if you know the Myers-Briggs, and so I'm not good at brainstorming either. I always have everything written out and planned, and so I bet by tonight you've got 15 different specific goals with butts, and I hope you'll email me some at dr.millie.gore@gmail, dr.millie.gore@gmail. If you can share some with me tonight, I would love to read them. And Brianne, I liked yours very much as well. If you have some more that you would be willing to share with me tonight, I'd love for you to email me at dr.millie, M-I-L-L, make sure there are two L's, I-E, .gore@gmail. The most common reason for someone to get an email bounced back to them is they only put one L in Millie and they think they've got two, but there's one. Okay. Key number 4. The story must have a definable beginning, middle, and end. You'd be surprised how many people write a vignette and call it a story. So a short story begins when the girl sets her goal and quickly encounters a barrier. That's her problem, her butt. I want to join the Storytellers Club. It meets after school on Tuesdays. No, said Mom, you know you can't stay after school because you have to babysit until I get home at 6. So I would start this story with that sentence. I want to join the Storytellers Club. It meets after school on Tuesdays. No, said Mom. You know you can't stay after school because you have to babysit until I get home at 6. So start the story when she's telling her what her goal is, and then very quickly it's stopped. Conflict, because story doesn't start until conflict starts. If she were to say, I want to join the Storytellers Club. It meets after school on Tuesdays. Okay, said Mom. Just, let me know how much money you need to join the Storytellers Club, and I'll be glad to come pick you up when it's over. I don't want you walking home alone after dark. And so terrific. And that's it. That's not a story because there isn't any conflict, and story is conflict. The girl has a goal and then she meets a but. Okay. The middle of the story is when the girl tries and fails to solve the problem. She has to try to solve the problem, and then she fails. If she has a problem and she immediately succeeds, she says, Mom says, no, you can't stay home after school. You can't stay after school because you have to babysit until I get home at 6. And the girl says, I've talked to Sandra, who she's there at their house all the time, and Sandra says she'll babysit for us for nothing on Tuesdays, so I can go to Storyteller Club. Ta-da! That's not a story. She's got to try something and fail at it. Then the story ends when the girl finally solves her problem. I read a lot of vignettes people give me that they believe to be stories, but they're not. They're just vignettes because there is no conflict there. So the story begins when the girl sets her goal. She quickly encounters her but, and then in the middle of the story is when she tries to solve the problem. She's gallant. She's a fighter. She's trying to solve the problem, but she fails. She doesn't quit, or that's not a problem either. So her mom says, no, your friend can't babysit for you. That's the end of that. And the girl gives up, and she doesn't get to join the Storytellers Club. Who would read that? A tween girl would hate that. Tween girls are experiencing life adventures through the eyes of the protagonist. So it has to end HEA, which stands for happily ever after. Sometimes you'll find story contests and they'll say the story must end HEA, which means happily ever after. So our story will end when the girl finally solves the problem. Number 5. So definable beginning, middle, and end. Number 5, keep the story fast-paced and engaging with dialogue. Appropriate dialogue speeds up a story and engages the reader. Narrative, where you're telling things, can slow it down and disengage the reader. About 6 months ago, I was judging a short story contest for tween girls. And I had a number of stories that were strictly narrative. There was no dialogue. Mary wanted to join the storytelling club. Her mother told her no, she couldn't. Mary always had to babysit her younger brothers and sisters after school. And her mother said that there was no way that she would be allowed to do anything else. Mary asked if she couldn't have her friend babysit on Tuesdays, and her mother said no, that wouldn't work. Then Mary went to the Storyteller Club president and asked if the meetings could be moved to the weekends. And there was no dialogue, and I was just exhausted. I had to force myself, and I always, if I'm asked to judge a contest, I judge a contest. I force myself to read every word, and I force myself to be open and wanting this story to go well. But the ones that didn't have dialogue just absolutely dragged me slower and slower and slower. Now, we have to use dialogue, but every scene and all dialogue must move the story forward. It can reveal something we need to know. It moves it forward that way, something we don't already know that we need to know. Or it can develop the character, but it has to develop it in such a way that it moves the stories forward. So example, this would not be dialogue that would move the story forward. 11-year-old Sarah came into the kitchen on a bright, shiny morning. Her dad was reading the newspaper and drinking coffee. Hey, Dad, you want some Eggos for breakfast? Sure, that sounds great. Man, look outside. The bluebells are just blooming out in the garden. Yeah, they are. They're gorgeous this year. I don't think they were so pretty last year. No, there wasn't much rain last year. You want some maple syrup or blueberry syrup with your Eggos? Oh, I think maple syrup. I mean, that dialogue doesn't move the story forward at all. It's just useful dialogue. Well, the person could claim they're trying to show about the relationship between Mary and her father, but that really doesn't show anything. They're just talking about the weather. That's not helpful in moving the story forward. Story dialogue is not real dialogue. Real dialogue is boring. And one of the people whose books on writing that I read said, go to Starbucks and eavesdrop. And she reported on a conversation she heard. I'm getting a Manny today, candy apple red, or something like that. Red anyway. Really? Cool. I'm thinking I'm doing like mauve, maybe. Or maybe like teal? Teal, huh? I need like a new pair of jeans online. Maybe like online or not. Where did you get yours? How boring can you get? Good story dialogue is tight, to the point, and moves the story forward. I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to want you to tell me some things you found out about just these 3 interchanges of dialogue. I begged my mom to let me join debate club. She refused, as usual. Did you tell her Mrs. Taylor said you're the smartest kid in our grade? The debate club would help you get college scholarships? Go to law school? Maybe become another RBG? I told her every word Mrs. Taylor said, but Mom insisted that babysitting comes first. Then she said that college isn't for people like us. She didn't even know or care who RBG was. Tight, to the point, moves the story forward, tells us things that we need to know, and tells us something about character. Please type something to Paul. There are a dozen things that I can find that we learned in those words. Type something to Paul that this tiny bit of dialogue revealed. Okay, and Brianna said that? Brianna said that the dialogue reveals that the girl is smart. She enjoys going to school, right? Does well in school, but she does not have a supportive mother. Excellent. What else? Thank you. That was wonderful. Okay. All right. I think that in addition to those things, we know that the teacher, the teacher is very interested in Brianna. So it might be that Mrs. Taylor is going to be one of her allies who will help her get her mom to change her mind. The fact that there is a debate club tells us it's a rather special school for teen girls, tween girls, to have a debate club in it. The reference to RBG tells us that the teacher believes that this girl has the potential of becoming a United States Supreme Court justice. We learn something about the culture of the family, whether it's ethnic culture or socioeconomic culture or whether their particular family culture, that mother said, college isn't for people like us. In the same way that my dad said, band is for boys, it isn't for girls. Mother said, college isn't for people like us. We know that there are younger children there, and that mom either works or is somehow involved in such a way that the girl has to come home and babysit. So that's information that we needed to know. She's not an only child. She's got other younger kids at home that have to be cared for. And the fact that her mom didn't know who RBG was means she certainly doesn't follow the news, know much about current events or history, and that she doesn't even care if indeed the daughter's perception was correct. All right. So, this is calling for you to brainstorm. I understand that. But this is pretty boring narrative, and you can turn this into great dialogue. Mary wanted to join the chess club, but it met after school. Her mother wouldn't let her because she was supposed to sweep her parents' store after school. Hannah, Mary's BFF, had joined the chess club. Hannah told Mary that with her good math skills, she could be the regional champion. So I would like you to take some time and see if you can turn that boring narrative into great dialogue. I'm watching the clock. I'll give you 2 more minutes, and then wherever you are, just stop and I'm not going to take too long for you to type it into us, but you'll at least have something to start with. And then we're going to wrap up. Okay, stop where you are. All right, summary of writing short stories for preteen girls. Key number 2, remember, we're not going in order because key number 2 was very specific to this workshop. A girl must be the hero of her own story. Dad can't rescue her. Mom can't rescue her. A handsome prince can't ride in and kiss her and save her. We don't want Lucy girls. We don't want stupid Lucy girls who get into trouble and somebody has to come along, usually a boy, and save them. Those are the stories I was raised on, was the Lucy girl stories. Always beautiful, always empty-headed, always getting herself into trouble, always having to be saved by a man, and then she's humbled and so grateful, and she's learned a lesson because the handsome man has taught her better. In key number 1, the writer must understand the purpose of story. The purpose of story is not to teach morals. There's a moral in a story, but the purpose of story is not to teach morals. I taught Sunday school, and I encourage you to do that. Teach morals in Sunday school, teach morals at church. But as a writer, our job is to entertain, to help people see the world in a new way, to let a girl see the world through the eyes of the protagonist, to see, this is a problem that a person might have. And this is a way that a person could solve it. That's different than teaching morals. Key number 3, the hero has a goal and a barrier, a goal and a but, a very specific goal that we derive from the list of general goals that psychologists tell us tween girls want. They want recognition. They want to have fun. They want to be part of a valued group. They want to learn new skills that are of interest to them. They want to be admired. So we take those general goals, from them we derive a specific goal, and then bam, we make her run up against a barrier that can be a parent, culture, money, any number of things. And she's got to figure out how to overcome that barrier, that but. She has a goal and a but. Key number 4, we don't write vignettes. A story is conflict. A story is conflict. The hero has the goal and then the conflict. Key number 4, the story must have a definable beginning, middle, and end. At the beginning of the story, right off the bat, the girl announces what her goal is. She wants to be on the yearbook staff. She wants to become president of the 7th grade. And then, bam, there's a conflict. She wants to be on the yearbook staff. It meets after school, and her mother says no. Or the class is limited to, the yearbook committee is limited to 8 people, and they already have 8 people signed up. How's she going to get on it? So a definable beginning, which is where she states her very specific goal. She doesn't say, I want to be admired. No, that didn't work. She has a specific goal. Then she immediately is going to hit the conflict, the barrier, the but. That's the beginning of the story. In the middle of the story, the girl is trying to figure out a way to reach her goal. She's got to work around this barrier, over, under, around, and through, like Brown Bear. Whatever it takes, she's trying, and she fails. She tries something that seems very promising, at least to a tween girl, and she fails. That's the middle of the story. Then through that failure, she comes up with another way of trying to overcome the barrier. She learns from the failure. She should learn from the failure. And then she tries something new, and she's able to accomplish her goal. And it's HEA, happily ever after. The girl meets her goal and is happily ever after. Key 5, keep the story fast-paced and engaging with dialogue. Good dialogue is not what people actually say. Go to Starbucks and overhear the people on the next table, and it's really boring, unless you happen to live maybe in Washington, D.C., and then you could hear things that might be state secrets. But in general, real dialogue is very boring. Our dialogue has to be fast-paced, and it must move the story forward. It moves the story forward either by something happening that is getting the girl closer to her goal, by telling us information we don't know, such as that in the last story that the girl's mother was not supportive of her joining the debate club, that she's a very bright girl, that the teacher says she's the brightest girl in her grade, that the mother doesn't even know who RBG is. So the story has got to be, the dialogue has got to be fast-paced, filled with stuff that moves the story forward, shows character, and tells us things that we don't know. So just to finish, and we're going to be quitting early here. Back in the old days of radio, this would be called dead time, and the library would get fined $10,000 for having dead time. But Paul says that's not going to happen. If you would tell me one of these keys that is going to be the most central to your writing for tween girls from this point on, I'd like to have at least 2 responses, and then we'll call it a day. Thank you, Brianna. She says, key number 1, the writer must understand the purpose of story. And key number 5, keep the and engaging with dialogue. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope that after you finish this story, you would consider emailing it to me, telling me you were in this workshop, and this is the story that this workshop helped you on your way to completing. Okay, well, we'll stop there. I want you to write every day. I want you to think about tween girls and their interests and their needs. And I want you to remember that we write the stories of our own lives. We create our goals. We struggle and try to reach them. We encounter our own butts, and we don't give up. We fail. I fail all the time, but I go back and try again based on what I learned from my failure. And so let's keep writing together. Let's keep getting out there and challenging the world, setting our goals and trying to make things happen. And in the course of that, making this a gentler, more beautiful, better place to live. Be safe. Take care of the ones you love. Millie out.